Good morning. Well, here we are. This is the 9th book of the Miriam series. We're slowly getting there. And it is Miriam's presents at Christmas. And once again, I'll read from the bump at the back of the book, which is better than me waffling on, trying to make it up as I go along, which I realise I'm not very good at doing. So this is far more professional if I do it this way, even though I'm not looking right at the camera. So Miriam's Presents at Christmas covers the last days of 2009 at the old house that Miriam, Roy and Rafa used to own. It's now Christmas, and Miriam's now middle-aged youngest daughter, Florence, and her two adult daughters, Faith and Betty, are preparing for Christmas amid one of the worst snowstorms to befall London in recent years. Do you remember that snowfall in 2009? I do. There are incidences aplenty. Rafa to be visited in a care home, a disaster or two, headstrong children, a husband who needs to be divorced, and old and long memories are stirred. But as Faith, heavily pregnant with her third child, comes to realise, the spirit of Miriam, real or imaginary, is not so far away. I enjoyed writing this book, but although Miriam is not exactly there physically, she is there. She's always been there. The Miriams of this world are always been there. Enjoy.
So let's paint a picture. It's Christmas 2009. We're in East London, and the city has just ground to a complete halt.
Yeah, and we're not talking about a light, picturesque dusting of snow. The sources are very specific about this.
No, not at all. This is deep, heavy, oppressive snow. It's the kind that paralyzes everything. Wanstead High Street, for instance, is at a total standstill. Beautiful in a way, but also chilling.
And that physical freeze, that external paralysis, it's just the perfect chilling backdrop for the internal chaos that is absolute consuming the Barker family.
Specifically Florence and her daughter, Faith.
Exactly. They're trapped inside this enormous rambling house, the old rectory in Snaresbrook, and suddenly this fortress feels incredibly fragile. It's a physical manifestation of their spiritual crisis, really.
And for this deep dive, we've gone through a pretty substantial stack of sources. We're talking articles, personal family notes, public records, all detailing this single, transformative, and, frankly, completely disastrous Christmas.
It really was.
So our mission today is to unpack how this relentless series of domestic failures, one after another, the heating blowing out, a Christmas tree fire, a violent teenage rebellion, and then a shocking Christmas Eve arrest. How all this unwittingly forces the family to confront these deep, historical, generational secrets.
Secrets that have been quietly held by the formidable matriarch, Miriam, and her lifelong friend, Rafa.
This is such a critical pivot point in this family's long saga.
Right.
And it really underlines the enduring presence of Miriam's life, even 16 years after her death.
It does. If you've followed this family's story through the sources, you know Miriam's presence is always there. Even when she's physically absent, she's a character in the room.
Absolutely.
And look, we aren't just looking at a run of bad luck over a holiday weekend. That's not what this is.
No, it's a catalyst.
It is a catalyst. It's where the pressure of modern, fragmented domestic life, bad partners, teenage entitlement, internet addiction, it all collides head-on with the lingering legacy of wartime struggle and austerity that actually built this family.
It's like the past and present are at war inside that house.
Yes. This entire sequence of events, it acts like a moral MRI. It strips away all the modern layers and forces Florence and Faith to really see what foundational strength they still possess, if any.
A moral MRI. I really like that framing. Okay, so let's start by setting the stage properly with the characters and the physical setting.
Let's do it.
So we have Florence. She's 61. She's struggling a bit, on a walking stick thanks to a bad ankle, and she's really trying to run the show.
And then you have her daughter, Faith. She's 40, heavily pregnant, and just utterly exhausted by her life, by her husband, by everything.
And they all live in this sprawling Victorian old rectory in Snaresbrook.
And the history of that house is so key here. It was originally bought at a knockdown price by Miriam, her husband Roy, and Rafa together.
That detail alone tells you so much.
It tells you everything. The fact that a major property purchase was led by a married couple and their non-related female friend. It tells you immediately who the real leaders were in that group.
Miriam and Rafa.
Miriam and Rafa. They were the foundational figures here, pooling their resources to secure a future. So this house, it's large, it's imposing, it should feel safe, but the snow and the breakdowns make it feel isolating and incredibly fragile.
And the most crucial living link to that foundation, as you mentioned, is Rafa. Can you tell us a bit more about her unique role in this whole saga?
Rafa she's the keeper of secrets. She truly is. The sources describe her as the last remaining link to Miriam's long history.
Florence even says something about it, right?
She does. Florence explicitly thinks that when she talks to Rafa, it's as if your gran is still alive. So Rafa isn't just an old friend, she's a co-witness. She was there for the events that shaped Miriam's entire character.
So she holds the key.
She holds the key to unlocking the family's true history, a history that, Faith and Florence only see the smooth-over surface of. A history that, as we're about to discover, is far more complex and, frankly, violent than they ever realized. Rafa holds the narrative integrity of the entire Barker legacy.
Okay, so before the house itself starts to implode, we get this first little peek into that history. Florence and Faith visit the East London cemetery in the snow.
Right, a quiet moment before the storm.
They're there to pay respects to Miriam Barker and Roy Barker. They both died in 1994. But even in this sacred, quiet place, Florence is distracted. She's annoyed by this old grievance she has.
Yes, the long-ago mix-up caused by the council. And you have to understand, for Florence, this is far more than just bureaucracy gone wrong. This is a historical disruption that still really rankles her.
And it has to do with the placement of the graves.
Exactly. Their grandparents, Percy Barrow and Faith Barrow, they're laid to rest nearby. But between Miriam's plot and her grandparents' plot, there sits some unknown woman called Brenda Savage.
A complete stranger.
A complete stranger wedged into their family line for eternity. And Florence still feels this intrusion so keenly, she just can't forgive the council for it.
Why do you think that detail is so potent for her? I mean, is it just about the physical space, or is there something deeper going on?
Oh, it's absolutely deeper. It's about control, and it's about narrative integrity. Florence's life, by her own account, has been chaotic. The gravesite is supposed to be the one place where the family lineage is ordered, respected, permanent.
And Brenda Savage messes that up.
Brenda Savage represents randomness. She's the unwelcome intrusion of the outside world, the council's incompetence. She's basically a symbol for all the things Florence feels she can't control in her own life, like her kids and her house. It symbolizes this unfinished reckoning with the past.
A sense that the family line is somehow fractured.
Fractured by external forces, yes.
And speaking of fractures,
Yeah.
What's truly fascinating here, and what the sources confirm, is the origin point of Miriam and Rafa's deep, almost spousal-level friendship. It's a place that completely shatters the image of this respectable, wealthy matriarch who bought the Snaresbrook Rectory.
That's right, the origin point. Miriam and Rafa met in Holloway Prison.
Holloway, in 1939.
In 1939. That detail, it just drops like a lead weight in the source material, doesn't it? It suggests that the entire family line, the foundation of their prosperity, their massive East London home, is rooted in wartime incarceration, immense hardship, and very complex lives.
It completely changes the context of Miriam's life. She's not just a provider.
She's a survivor, 100%.
But wait, meeting in a prison in 1939? I mean, that just shatters the whole image. What kind of political or personal situation would have landed Miriam there? And why did that experience bond them so intensely?
Well, the sources don't specify the exact charges. And you have to remember, during that period of wartime confusion, many women were detained for what we'd now consider minor, quickly forgotten infractions. It could have been civil disobedience, could have just been being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
So the charge isn't the point.
No, the key is the shared experience, the confinement, the austerity. That immediately shifts the perspective for Florence and Faith. Their family didn't start with comfort. They started with shared trauma and shared endurance.
That shared history is the definition of resilience.
It is. And it's why Rafa is so essential to this story. She is the sole witness to Miriam's greatest trials.
And speaking of life choices, that cemetery visit, It forces Florence into this moment of really uncomfortable self-reflection about her own choices, linking all the way back to Miriam's foresight.
Absolutely. She's standing there thinking about how she regrets ignoring her mother Miriam's warnings about her disastrous first marriage to Jonathan Hill.
And Miriam had his number from the start.
Oh, she did. With that incredible generational foresight that so often comes from surviving true scarcity, she had called Jonathan a long-haired layabout who would probably be arrested for drugs one day.
And she was proven chillingly right.
Completely. Jonathan served 10 years for drug smuggling and tragically died in 1998. His body was cremated by Camden Council because he was an impoverished beggar.
Wow. That is a stark, brutal ending. A total confirmation of Miriam's prediction. And Florence sees this exact same pattern repeating itself now with her own daughter.
It's the circle of life, as Florence recognizes it. She notes that Faith is now repeating this pattern by failing to listen to any warnings about her own husband, Owen.
And Florence does not mince words about Owen in the source notes.
No, she describes him with incredible bluntness. A lazy, complete dick and crap as a father. So this is where we see the generational struggle really play out. It's not necessarily trauma being passed down, but maybe the inherited inability to heed warnings.
Or the need to choose chaos despite the wisdom of their predecessors.
Yes, and all of that just sets the inevitable stage for this disastrous Christmas weekend.
And the chaos begins, fittingly, with the house itself. The structure turning against them, it's absolutely freezing outside, and the internal atmosphere starts to reflect that because of the first major domestic disaster.
The central heating blows out.
And again, this isn't some simple modern breakdown. The house is fighting back with its own history.
It really is. The system was an antique, installed way back in early 1951. There were documents found under old carpets during the post-war refitting that prove it. It's this huge, inefficient system, but it symbolizes the comfort that Miriam and Roy had worked so hard for.
And now, in 2009, it's failed.
Failed because the parts are just impossible to find. They are suddenly, literally thrust into a past they never had to live through.
And Owen, the supposed adult in the room, the supposed plumbing expert, he does exactly what Florence would have predicted.
He provides excuses and alcohol. He drinks instead of even trying to diagnose the problem properly, claiming it's just the thermostat and parts are hard to find.
And he delivers the bad news with no urgency at all.
No, just lazily.
Yeah.
The shop owner estimates a week for a repair. A week. This leaves a massive rectory frigid, plunging the whole family back into something resembling post-war austerity.
And Florence is just trying to hold it together.
She tries. She forces a smile and says, "We'll be in for a cozy Christmas." But their only salvation is a few old fireplaces that can barely heat these immense rooms, and one tiny gas-fired water heater in the first-floor bathroom.
Which becomes the center of their universe.
It becomes the only source of warmth and hygiene in the entire house.
So we have a cold, massive historical house and a completely useless male figure. This is a profound collapse of modern comfort. They're basically replicating the very conditions Miriam fought so hard to escape.
But the psychological pressure just keeps building. The physical cold makes every single interpersonal interaction tighter, more brittle. And then comes disaster number 2.
The Christmas tree fire.
The fire, a devastating moment of lost tradition.
Florence has gone through all this nostalgic labor decorating this enormous 12-foot spruce. She's using the heirloom lights.
The ones bought long ago from a little Jewish man in East Ham High Street by Miriam and Rafa. These weren't just some commercial store-bought lights. These were objects with memory.
They were pretty old, as Florence herself notes in the sources.
And their age betrays them. The electrical systems, frayed by decades of storage and use. The source says there's an immediate electrical bang, a blue flash, and the wiring just ignites.
And the whole tree goes up.
The whole 12-foot tree bursts into flame like a massive candle. The speed of it is terrifying. The damage is extensive and visceral. The front room becomes a disaster zone, scorched carpet, melted decorations, and this thick, noxious smoke everywhere.
What stands out to me here is the failure of their safety infrastructure. The source specifically mentions the smoke alarm didn't go off immediately. Why do you think that's an important detail?
Because it creates a deeper layer of worry and anxiety. The physical threat is real. A fire in an old Victorian house with minimal working heating is terrifying enough.
But the alarm feeling is a betrayal.
It's a betrayal by the modern world. It confirms that the house itself is decaying and hostile. Is the past literally incinerating the present and all the traditions Florence cherished, leaving behind the smell of soot and burnt plastic to mingle with that omnipresent chill?
Okay, so let's unpack this next bit. We shift from a physical fire to a more personal one, the teenage crisis. And here's where it gets deeply relatable for any parent struggling with modern boundaries.
Yes. Faith finds blood on her 14-year-old daughter, Kay's t-shirt.
And this is where Kay's rebellion goes from typical teenage angst to something actually dangerous.
It's a classic generational conflict, but taken to a really dangerous extreme. Faith later discovers this poorly completed, now infected tattoo, a crude bird in flight on Kay's upper arm.
And who did it?
It was done 2 days prior by her friend Paulette, who was also only 14. So obviously not a registered tattooist, and there's a suggestion she might have used kitchen dye in a completely unhygienic environment.
So the consequences are immediate and they're interruptive.
They absolutely are. It forces a trip to Whipps Cross Hospital for cleaning and a tetanus injection. It pulls Faith away from the already spiraling domestic crisis at home.
And Faith's fury isn't just about the danger, is it?
No, it's heightened by Kay's ungrateful attitude and her use of profanity. She calls her brother Ian a little fucker and just generally defies her mother's authority at every turn. It's the sheer lack of deference that seems to infuriate Faith the most.
Right. And again, the generational comparison comes back.
It always does. It's often the source of necessary dark humor in these dark moments. Florence jokes, saying that Miriam, Kay's great-grandmother, would have gone absolutely spare.
Or just sorted it out with a single look.
Exactly. It emphasizes how much societal norms have shifted. Miriam's generation had to worry about V2 rockets. Faith's generation is worried about illegal, infected bird tattoos on their children.
But that personal act of rebellion is very quickly overshadowed by the climax of Owen's irresponsibility.
The source material details this catastrophic Christmas Eve sequence so vividly. Owen staggers home late. He's described as glassy-eyed, very unsteady, smelling strongly of beer and spirits.
And he makes this, frankly, incredible admission.
He admits he drove home in that state. Florence sees him in the hallway, just amazed and shocked that he managed to avoid killing himself or someone else on the way.
But the hammer blow falls later that evening.
The police arrive. Officers inform Florence and Samuel that Owen is being arrested on suspicion of causing a road traffic accident while drunk, reckless endangerment, and failing to stop.
And they handcuff him right there.
Right there in the hallway, a public humiliation witnessed by the family.
And the consequences are immediate.
The incident was captured on CCTV, and Owen has essentially admitted the charges. So the immediate shocking consequence is that he will be held in custody until Saturday court, because the courts are closed for Christmas. He will spend Christmas Day locked up.
It gets worse.
It gets much worse. The sergeant at the station later confirms to Faith that a child was injured in the accident. She leaves the police station in utter despair, realizing she could be facing the possibility of manslaughter charges if that injured boy dies.
So the family's present has completely imploded.
Right on the cusp of Christmas Day. This is a tragedy of Owen's own making, a complete and total abdication of responsibility.
The sheer gravity of that potential charge manslaughter. It just gives Faith's personal problems an immediate, horrifying new scale. Let's pause there for a moment. This whole sequence, from the boiler failure to the arrest, it really showcases the fragility of the modern domestic unit when financial stability and personal responsibility just disappear.
It does. It feels like Miriam's generation, for all their hardship, had a much stronger framework of collective responsibility. Their challenges were external, the enemy, the economy. Faith's challenges are internal, the person she chose to build a life with.
Owen's actions are the ultimate betrayal.
Yes, the ultimate betrayal of the family unit. And he brings the state, the police, the courts into the home in the most violent way possible. This sets the scene for Christmas Day, which unbelievably somehow manages to get even worse.
Which brings us to Christmas Day itself. Despite the cold, the soot from the fire, and Faith attempting to uninvite them via what sounds like an obviously terrible, furious phone call with Helen.
The Freemans arrive. Owen's parents. They show up at the frozen, ruined rectory.
And this is truly a social nightmare imposed on a domestic tragedy.
Oh, the description of the Freemans in the source material is just priceless. Patrick, the father-in-law, is a psychiatrist and an unquenchable snob. He seems to view the Barkers as subjects for study, not as family.
And the mother, Helen.
Helen is just as snobbish. She instantly starts critiquing the large, cold house, the family's failure to manage their lives. And then there's Mia, the daughter, described as nothing less than a social nightmare.
She arrives in designer clothes and a Santa hat.
Wearing a jaunty Santa's hat and chain-smoking 3 packs a day. They are the absolute antithesis of the Barkers' gritty, chaotic East London reality.
And the passive aggression and interrogation start immediately, almost before they've taken their coats off.
Helen immediately blames Faith for Owen's behavior and arrest. She says, "This is your fault, Faith. You know that, don't you?" And Faith, who is hardened by the visit to the police station and fueled by this righteous anger, she counters this cruelty by emphasizing the severity of the situation. Owen might be facing manslaughter charges. The sources just capture this oppressive, suffocating atmosphere perfectly. The Freemans act as though they're visiting a zoo, observing the pathetic collapse of the lower classes.
And Patrick, the psychiatrist, he takes the cruelty to a genuinely shocking and cruel new level, targeting Faith's unmarried sister, Betty.
He absolutely does. Betty lives with her friend, Scarlett, and Patrick under this guise of intellectual curiosity, openly asks Betty about her deviancy.
Her deviancy.
Yes. He states they have known for years and suggests a university up north is working on a program to, quote, cure it. Betty is stunned. This is a calculated, deliberate act of psychological violence designed to inflict maximum pain under the guise of scientific observation.
That's just deliberate cruelty.
Absolutely. Betty is stunned into silence and flees the room, shattering the already tenuous Christmas peace. The quiet resistance of Samuel and Betty, Samuel leaving to use the toilet just to avoid Patrick's conversation, it highlights the depth of their discomfort.
But the psychological warfare is soon replaced by the physical. We get to the final dramatic domestic catastrophe. They're attempting to have Christmas lunch, but the fire in the grate fueled by Ian's damp wood has been smoking continuously.
The room is filled with a haze. Ian notices a noise from the chimney, but before anyone can really react, a low, ominous rumble fills the entire kitchen.
It's described as sounding like a small bomb.
It is. The chimney, which desperately needed a sweep but was neglected due to all the heating chaos, suffers a catastrophic failure. The rumble results in this sudden, violent atmospheric thrust, a literal explosion that sends a massive cloud of hot ash and a huge, wide, dark mass of inky, warm soot expanding instantly and silently through the kitchen.
Coating everyone
and everything in blackness and chaos. It's this immediate transformation of the entire scene into something horrific and primal.
And in that pandemonium, Faith, who is already wobbly from the emotional and physical stress of her pregnancy and the concussion from the hospital trip, she falls backward.
She hits her head violently against the cooker. She sustains a long gash and she passes out.
The scene that's described is almost gothic.
It is. The family, now these black, ghostly figures, stands outside in the heavy snow, coughing up black sputum. Ian is violently sick from the shock and the inhalation.
The Freemans.
The sooty Freemans, Helen now swearing uncontrollably, they rush to collect their coats and bags and they just leave, without a single apology. They even leave their expensive designer-wrapped gift suitcase behind as they beat a hasty retreat.
It's the ultimate rejection.
The ultimate rejection. They leave the wreckage, confirming their absolute contempt. And this moment symbolizes the complete and total breakdown of their modern domestic life, driving Faith and Samuel back to Whipps Cross Hospital, this time with paramedics.
But the breakdown isn't quite finished yet. While Faith is at the hospital, Kay, Samuel, and Betty go back inside to try and deal with this apocalyptic mess. But when Faith arrives home later, she finds her younger son, Ian, in his room.
And she finds Ian, who's only 8 years old, drinking a can of Foster's and watching deeply inappropriate material on his computer.
And this is the final straw.
This is the straw that breaks the camel's back. Faith is exhausted. She's concussed. Her house is ruined. Her husband is in jail. And now she discovers her young son engaging in behaviors that symbolize the total failure of the modern, unregulated digital world.
Her fury is just monumental. She doesn't just tell him off. She performs this act of pure, visceral destruction.
An act that cuts the family off from the source of this modern decay. She smashes the monitor and the main computer unit. Then, in a final, furious act, she rips out the internet cable and the router, shrieking at Ian and Kay, "Where's the fucking router?" This act marks the peak of the domestic crisis. Faith is responding to modern chaos. The unregulated internet, teenage entitlement, Owen's irresponsibility, with a primal, violent rage. It's a complete contrast to the stoic, quiet endurance that Miriam's generation demonstrated during the war. It suggests that modern problems perhaps require modern violent solutions when all emotional resources are depleted.
It's the absolute breaking point. But this physical and emotional collapse, coupled with the pregnancy and the hospital drugs she received for the concussion, it ironically opens a door into the past, It enables the most significant part of our deep dive, the epiphanic vision.
It's a moment of profound spiritual and psychological clarity born from utter exhaustion.
And Faith is convinced her grandmother, Miriam, visited her in this dreamlike state after her concussion.
Miriam, dressed in a surprising but vividly described Christmas red dress, takes Faith on this emotional, visceral tour of the family's true history. And the mission of this tour is very clear. It is to fundamentally put Faith's current worst week of my life into perspective. It's a lesson in generational strength through the lens of generational struggle.
Let's delve into that tour, because these scenes are short, sharp lessons designed to teach Faith the true cost of survival and the depth of their heritage. What does she learn from her great-grandfather?
Well, first, Faith is shown Percy Barrow, her great-grandfather, at work. He's happily digging a long pit for cables on Romford Road, sweating for 12 hours a day, 6.5 days a week.
And he's happy.
He's happy. Miriam emphasizes his profound pride and contentment in providing for his family, despite the sheer hard labor. And Miriam challenges Faith directly, asking, "He's not sad. Why are you?"
That contrast is so essential. Owen, Faith's husband, couldn't be bothered to repair a boiler or even hold down a job. Yet here is Percy, sweating for 12 hours a day, finding dignity in the basic act of provision.
Exactly. Percy's pride was foundational. Owen's problem is the complete collapse of professional dignity and the abandonment of the provider role. It's not just about labor, it's about self-worth and responsibility. Then Miriam shows Faith a hidden family trauma that defines Percy's quiet strength.
The great-grandfather crying alone.
Faith sees Percy crying alone over his infant twin son, Michael, who was not expected to live. Now, Michael did survive briefly, but he died young, and Faith never even knew she had a great-uncle Michael. Percy carried this secret, silent pain all his life.
A powerful lesson in hidden grief.
A very powerful lesson. The fact that even the strongest men in the family carried these profound emotional burdens that were never shared, in contrast to the instant, public emotional chaos of the modern Barkers.
And then Miriam pivots to the brutal wartime anguish that she and Rafa endured.
Yes, and this is where Faith's current suffering is truly contextualized. Faith sees Miriam herself in Holloway Prison in 1939, distraught after witnessing her friend Eva hang herself in the next cell.
So that's the source of their bond.
That is the source of the Great House's foundation. A deep connection forged in the shadow of death and incarceration. Then, she says, the miserable evacuation to Devon. And this wasn't a holiday. This was sleeping on straw beds amidst the vileness and squalidness of their unwelcoming hosts, who clearly resented having to oust them.
It's those small, continuous humiliations that must have defined that entire era.
Precisely. And finally, she sees her great-uncle Peter, Miriam's son, crying himself to sleep over his friend Nicola, who died in a raid, a secret grief the family missed entirely. Miriam is showing Faith that their history is paved with endless tears, loss, and impossible choices, all kept silent and internal.
In stark contrast to the dramatic, destructive chaos of Faith's Christmas 2009.
Exactly.
This emotional tour, it culminates in the single most shocking secret Faith uncovers. It concerns Miriam's first husband, Raymond, who was the father of Peter and Mary. For decades, the family had a settled story about his death.
Yes, the long-held, established family lie was that Raymond died of an illness, specifically blood poisoning, at the end of the war. It was a clean, tragic, but manageable death story.
But Miriam reveals the shocking truth, or at least the framework of it, in the vision.
She does. Raymond had written to her asking to meet. Miriam and Rafa went to the meeting spot, the Salvation Army mission in King's Cross, only to find that it had been destroyed minutes before by a V-2 rocket, killing everyone inside.
And Miriam implies that literally nothing was ever found of him.
Nothing. This horrific detail is too much for Faith to fully process initially. It's too violent, too immediate.
And the reason for the blood poisoning lie is so crucial to understanding Miriam's protective nature.
It is the defining act of her protective strength. She chose to invent the story of illness to spare Peter and Mary and all the subsequent generations, the trauma of knowing their father had been blown to bits in that chaotic, random, and terrifying wartime environment.
She controlled the narrative of pain.
It was an act of love and preservation. She didn't want the children to live with that visceral image of their father's violent, sudden disintegration. She managed the grief so that they could survive.
That is just immense emotional labor. Comparing that to Owen's constant shirking of responsibility provides such stark context for Faith. But Miriam, ever the pragmatist, offers Faith incredibly blunt, modern advice.
She really does. She cuts straight to the chase. On Owen, she says, you should definitely boot out of your house, which is a piece of advice Faith deeply needed to hear just to confirm her own instincts. Florence is later surprised the advice is so blunt, but she wholeheartedly agrees that Faith must protect herself and her children.
And what about the two teenagers, Kay and Ian, whose modern rebellions cause so much panic?
Miriam's advice is to let them be. She asserts they will grow out of their anger and confusion. This advice is rooted in a fundamental understanding of what real danger actually is. Kay's tattoo, Ian's inappropriate viewing, while troublesome, are distractions. They are not existential threats. The real priority is self-preservation.
And perhaps the most profound piece of advice concerns Mia, the chain-smoking social nightmare who helped ruin Christmas lunch.
Yes. Faith is advised that Mia can be ignored, which lowers Faith to Mia's own level, or she can be shown love. Because, as Miriam says, the worse a person's behavior is, the greater the cry for help.
That's a deep psychological insight.
It is perhaps drawn from Miriam's time in Holloway, understanding that outward nastiness is often rooted in profound internal pain. It advises Faith to rise above the pettiness and look for the hidden wound. And then finally, Miriam confirms the baby is a girl. She's a beautiful soul, Faith.
So this vision, it acts as a transformative roadmap. Faith wakes up in the hospital, and this new clarity is overriding her concussion and her exhaustion. The weight of the 2009 disasters has been utterly minimized by the knowledge of the 1944 tragedies. The stage is now set for a new, stronger beginning.
Exactly. Faith delivers her baby girl. The moment of birth provides an instant reset, a tangible physical link to the future. But the moment is bittersweet because Owen, just released on bail, turns up looking bedraggled as normal.
And his appearance is fleeting, proving Miriam right one last time.
One last time. Owen stays less than an hour. He leaves Faith and their newborn baby in the hospital to go see a friend.
Unbelievable.
It cements Faith's decision. This is his final defining act of selfishness. He literally chooses a beer over his newborn child and his wife, confirming that he is, in Florence's own words, a complete dick.
And Florence, incensed by this ultimate act of selfishness, takes decisive action. It feels rooted in Miriam's protective instinct.
She becomes the family enforcer. Florence immediately phones Helen and Patrick, which leads to this fiery, expletive-laden name-calling row, where Florence just gives them a piece of her mind, fueled by the strength of her generational inheritance.
And then she acts.
She resolves to change the locks on the rectory immediately, to keep Owen out forever. The Barker women are finally exercising the generational strength Miriam preached about by setting firm, necessary boundaries.
The new baby is named Rafa, which is a profound honor that brings great joy to the frail great-aunt. And this leads us to Rafa's final, peaceful farewell.
It's a moment of beautiful, necessary closure. Susan, the senior carer, explains that Rafa is exhibiting a surge of energy. She's eating well, her memory has improved, she's alert, which, she says, often precedes death by a day or two.
The final flicker.
The final flicker of life. And it's a precious time for Faith to share the baby and the name.
And Rafa uses this final clarity to fully confirm the truth about Raymond, bridging that final gap between Faith's dream and the factual history.
She does. She confirms the story of blood poisoning was indeed a lie that Miriam invented to spare the children the trauma of knowing their father had been blown to bits by a V-2 rocket blast at King's Cross.
And she gives it her blessing, in a way.
She does. She tells Faith that she and Miriam had discussed the lie extensively. She notes the profound honor of the name Rafa and confirms her close bond with Miriam. We discussed it, your mother and I. Rafa is ensuring that the final, most crucial secret is transferred directly to the next generation, confirming that Faith's vision was truly an epiphanic moment, not a delusion.
And later that night, having fulfilled her final duty and transferred the family legacy, Rafa asks Susan to stay with her. She says it's time, closes her eyes, and dies peacefully.
The last remaining living link to Miriam's world is gone.
But the knowledge is now safely preserved within Faith.
And this leads to the final, powerful, intergenerational perspective shift. Faith, recovering from her ordeal and holding her new daughter, realizes that the entire weekend's chaos, the tattoo, the fire, the arrest, the soot explosion, the Freemans, all of it was merely a drop in the ocean compared to the wars, the prison, the constant misery, and the hidden grief that Miriam and Rafa survived.
And Florence reflects too. She recognizes that despite the cold and the soot, despite the criminal charges and the divorce on the horizon, they still have health, food, shelter, and, as she says, each other more than anything else. Faith is moving toward divorce, equipped with Miriam's firm advice and the knowledge of her ancestors' resilience.
And the modern domestic chaos is then contained. Florence buys Ian a new restricted laptop and router, which symbolizes the family's controlled adaptation to the modern world. It's a balance of technological access and responsible caution. They have learned to manage their problems decisively, informed by the hard lessons of the past.
So the sources for this deep dive powerfully illustrate a key lesson for all of us. The Barker family survived a weekend of total modern chaos, bad marriages, technological breakdown, emotional strife, precisely because of the deep, often hidden reserves of resilience that were established during wartime austerity and personal hardship.
And the act of revealing and integrating those old secrets, that's what allowed Faith and Florence to move past their domestic struggles with a renewed perspective and strength.
This deep dive really proves that understanding your historical context, it provides more than just trivia. It provides a survival framework. Faith's problems are relative. The knowledge that her ancestors survived a V2 blast in prison and chose to lie to protect her children, that gives Faith the courage to take absolute control of her future.
It does. She can boot out Owen, she can set boundaries for her children. The ultimate cost was the loss of Rafa. But the knowledge now resides within Faith, safe for the next generation.
And the source material ends with Faith reflecting that her daughter's hair smells exactly like Miriam's. The name, Rafa, is now the ultimate link to the strength that was almost forgotten. Despite the profound grief of losing that last direct connection, Faith now carries the secrets and the strength of Miriam forward.
Which leaves you with a question to think about. What deep buried truths might be shaping the choices and conflicts in your life? And how might knowing them unlock your own generational strength? Sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in self-help books, but in the untold, harsh stories of the people who came before you. It just might take a chimney exploding to make you realize it.